Hey everybody, it's a live topic coming at you here from Japan. I thought I'd give you guys a special treat today, something that I think everybody who either lives or comes to visit Japan can really appreciate. So today I am actually going to be taking a stroll to Senzoku Ike Park over in Otaku, where there's an actual very important historical figure of Japan that resides here. I thought, be an interesting thing to kind of take a look at and see. But one of the things that I really would like to point out, honestly, is just that Japan is such an old country with such a well-preserved history that it's really not hard to find, historical pieces of its history at any place in the country. Even here in Tokyo, where there's busy tall buildings, lots of people, and it's just increasing, and expanding and fastly growing, you'll always be able to find some minor piece of history or major piece of history right in your very own backyard, such as myself. That being said, I just thought, let's take a look and see what we have to see up ahead. So here we are, we've made it. Now, oftentimes throughout history, you might look back and see that there are individuals, someone that stands out. Oftentimes a maverick. That really helps to bring modernism to the present, or to that current time. Someone that has vision beyond the future and also has a sense of open-mindedness. Well, in this case, after America came to Japan to establish trade and empowering the emperor with new weapons and technologies, there was a real issue, power struggle with the current ruling class at the time, the Tokugawa shogunate. Now, the Tokugawa shogunate had been ruling relatively peacefully for over 200 years. And now, after coming across this modern enemy, there was oftentimes, some debate on what they should do. That's when they came and turned to what was once, I guess you could say, a lower class samurai, Katsu Kaishu. Now, he was considered an outsider, someone who spent time, studying the West and Dutch and things of that nature. Now, the reason why that Katsu Kaishu was part of the Tokugawa, even though he was considered an outsider, somebody who wasn't a traditionalist by any means, was the fact that he had knowledge of the Western world. So because he spent time in America, about 2 months in San Francisco, and studied the Dutch language and different military sciences for a good portion of his life since he was a young man, he became quite adept and became what you would consider a subject matter expert on the West for Japan during the time. One of the things is when Katsu Kaishu actually went to the U.S., he was residing in San Francisco at the time, and during those days, he was really impressed with a lot of what was going on with the current culture at the time. One of the things that he saw, obviously, was the strong American Navy ships at that time that were very, very, overwhelming in power compared to what Japan had at the time. Now, the other thing that stood out to him more so than anything was that people, no matter what class they were in America, they were able to join the military or own a business or go back and forth, vice versa. Everybody, in his eyes, appeared to be equal. So basically, Katsu Kaishu was responsible for bringing the modern Japanese Navy to Japan. Now, before we get into more of his history, one of the best ways that you can honor and respect a person is to talk a little bit about themselves. Oftentimes, when looking back at historical figures, people do take account of their personalities, but oftentimes we just get overshadowed by just their accomplishments, which is, not, too hard to understand. But, one of the cool things about Katsu Kaishu was that he was not a violent person. Yeah, he was in the military and he saw the need for protecting Japan, but he was, as an adept swordsman, he's never drew a sword on a person before. He was very skilled with his sword, but he never once drew it. It kind of just leads into the whole notion that just because you have power doesn't mean you should use it. Also, despite the fact that many times, about roughly 20 different times, people have tried to take his life. He's been shot at, he's been stabbed, he's had all sorts of things happen to him, and he still didn't draw upon anybody. Now, so that just shows something about the man's character. So, although Katsu Kaishu was a maverick, he was also a very smart man. At that time, it had already been relevant in history that the West was colonizing the world. And, you know, you saw a great example that would have been Britain to India at the time. So this was something that really concerned Katsu Kaishu. Even though he had much respect for the West and its culture, he also feared that the same might happen to Japan. So that he eventually ended up giving knowledge and oftentimes secrets to both sides, from the emperor side and the shogunate side at the same time. Well, obviously at one point he was discovered by the shogunate, and Tokugawa ended up basically put him under house arrest and also give him the lowest base pay that they could possibly give him. That was all until one day when there was word that the emperor, the Saigo's army more specifically, was going to attack Edo Castle and destroy all of the shogunate. At that time, there was about 1 million people who lived in the castle, in Edo Castle area, and that would have been a catastrophic event for Japan's history. Katsu Kaishu obviously knew this, and in his last effort, decided to write a letter to Saigo before the attack, basically to say, hey, there's bigger fish in the sea, and there's a lot bigger enemies, and we should work together as one, basically. I'm just paraphrasing, obviously, because, it's not my letter. But anyways, so basically he said, we have bigger enemies to worry about, or we have bigger threats to worry about from the West. Is the old ruling class and the new need to work together, so that way when the threat comes to our shores, that we are able to fight it together. And that being said, Saigo decided to, with some stipulations and stuff like that, basically, not destroy all the shogunates and its people. And the shogunate eventually decided to fully comply with the rendering of the power over the last 15 years back to the emperor, and all extreme rebels decided to, basically end it all. So after writing that letter to Saigo, which reached, his heart, obviously, and what now credits Katsu Kaishu for not only saving the people in Edo Castle, but also, saving what would be considered now modern Japan. Katsu Kaishu has a lot of other accomplishments, but, he had started that naval school, brought the Navy to Japan, and he also, brought a different sense of military advancement in terms of, different classes being able to rise into the ranks of the military. There's all sorts of things like this that Katsu Kaishu endorsed and brought to Japan, and now he's considered basically the savior of modern day Japan. In the end, this is where Katsu Kaishu decided to lay and rest forever. And it's not hard to see why. So that is the man who brought you basically modern day Japan. Maybe he didn't directly bring you the manga, maybe he didn't directly bring you the sushi, but he helped bring a modern time and a modern progressive mindset to the Japanese culture. Now, obviously, everything takes time, and it wasn't an overnight ordeal, but we can really thank Katsu Kaishu. Basically, he's one of the reasons why I'm here today. So, it's something that I think is really cool. As a person, as an individual, he was an amazing person, well respected even amongst notable people throughout the world at the time. That being said, I look forward to having more of these sorts of adventures with you guys as we continue our journey here in Japan, and hopefully we find some more interesting characters soon that we could really study and come across, and maybe get a little more sophisticated as time goes on.